Well, the paradigm shift for, and this is not so much with rare patients, but in general, nobody's ever really treated patients like consumers, right? We treat them completely differently. But healthcare patients, I mean, the rare patients have less of a choice, but I mean, patients have a choice on where they get their healthcare delivered. And if you look at millennials, 25 or 30% of millennials don't have primary care physicians anymore. They get all their healthcare delivered in an ambulatory model. So they go to Zoom care clinics or urgent care clinics, and they do it all through their iPhone, right? They schedule through their iPhone, they get their labs through their iPhone, they get all their notes through their iPhone. There is no, so if the world doesn't keep pace with that, if patients in their everyday lives use their iPad or their iPhone or their web services to bank, to schedule their appointments, to get all their information services, and then you ask them to participate in a trial that is throwing them back 2 or 3 decades, right, where we don't have any technology. You have to go to the doctor's office and fill out paper forms. That is completely kind of a world of, cognitive dissonance there. It's weird. So for parents, I mean, they have their own lives, right? They have their lives to lead, and then they have children that are sick, and on top of that, they have children that are healthy, and you have to give them a way to participate in research that doesn't completely upend their world. So their entire world is about the child that has a disease, but they have to also balance it out with the rest of the world. And so with a mobile model, a virtual model, we lower that barrier to entry, right? We give those patients an opportunity to participate in research that they may not have had before because of the complexity of participating in a trial. And we're working with healthcare providers as well. So healthcare providers also see this challenge. So we can push that data directly to a healthcare provider, to the physician participating in the trial. We can create and engage with televisits. We can partner with Bluetooth-enabled device companies so that we can collect all of that data in real time, push that data directly to the healthcare provider, and in essence create probably a safer environment. So if we can in real time collect and push data to a healthcare provider in between visits, then that healthcare provider gets a much broader picture of what's happening in that patient's life. So I mean, there is all these people in the world that are innovating and using technology. And then we have all these amazing minds that are innovating and creating this amazing new drugs and treatments and cures for patients. And then we have this in-between world where we try to get the two to combine. And that has been a big challenge for people. And people use the regulatory environment as their excuse repeatedly. I think the argument is, patients die every day we wait. Every day we don't get it, these drugs into their hands. And so I'm not really keen on using the regulatory excuse. I totally get that we have a confined regulatory environment and we have to ensure patient safety and we have kind of statistical methodology, but when you get into the rare population, I think that we have to figure out a way to do what we've always done, but in a way that actually makes it accessible for patients. So PRA Health Sciences is a global contract research organization. We basically are the arms and legs of getting clinical trials done. So we operate as an adjunct to pharmaceutical and biotech companies. So a lot of those companies don't have the internal resources to conduct clinical research, and so they outsource that to companies like ours. We've been doing this for a really long time, I think like 30 years now. And I think what you find is that the status quo, at least what we're finding, the status quo is not enough. And so lots of people are looking at ways to get bigger, broaden their scope. We're trying to focus on technology. So how do we take all of the advances in technology and that innovation and use it to connect patients to trials? And how do we switch the dialogue so that instead of making patients feel like they are lucky to participate in research, that the patients are driving that dialogue with the physicians and with the pharmaceutical and the biotech companies to say, these are our engagement rules and this is how we want to participate in research. And so we are trying to figure out how do we do that and how do we leverage that technology to make trials faster, quicker, more accessible, and lowering that barrier to entry is the first step. So we know that patients live their everyday lives through mobile devices and through mobile technology, whether they are parents on Facebook, tracking their children's lives, whether they are banking, whether they are engaging with people via text messages, whether they're a millennial. We know that millennials, a majority of millennials would rather lose their car than their phone. That environment is the environment that we live in. We have a clinical trial industry that is still steeped in tradition. We are still doing the same things in clinical research we did 20 or 30 years ago. And some of that is healthcare related, but healthcare is actually moving quicker than the clinical trial space as well. So we are trying to fit ourselves into that paradigm. And I don't know any other way to connect a rare community that could span the globe in a real-time environment without mobile technology. And so we certainly could go on doing things the way we've always done them. That's an easy thing to do. I'm not sure that path is really going to make the world better for anybody. So that's our focus. I think that we are trying to innovate through technology and insert our research into patients' lives and make it easier for them to connect. So I think the simplest way to help people understand is today we collect lots of data around patient-reported outcomes. How did the patient feel during the trial? How did their disease change during the trial, et cetera? And we collect that in lots of ways, lots of paper sources. We have certain devices that patients can have. In a mobile environment, in a bring your own device model, we deploy all of those scales through an app on your phone. So any patient can log into the app and collect that data. So that's a simple methodology to show how it works. In a more complex model, so we can send a kit to a patient's home that has an entire suite of Bluetooth-enabled devices. Depending on what their disease is, it could be a Bluetooth scale, a blood pressure cuff, pulse oximeter, glucometer, any medical grade device that's out there that can connect to a patient's phone or iPad through a Bluetooth connection. We can then have that patient do their own testing at home, collect that data directly into the patient's phone, and push it to their physician. This allows a patient that may be several hundred miles away, or a state or two away, or a country away from a physician, to still be able to provide that physician the key information, at least from a vital statistic perspective, to that physician. We can also use that app to send out home healthcare nurses to that patient to do blood draws. We can send out lab orders from the hospital directly to the patient so they can take it to a nearby clinic and get their blood drawn and then send that data to the hospital. So there's lots of ways we can interact through the phone. And what it does is it minimizes that need for the patient to make that long journey to wherever that trial site is. We're not going to totally replace those visits. You'll still need those interim visits, maybe the initial visit with a physician, key visits. So if there are specific medical tests that need to be done, or surgical applications or things like that, those definitely need to still be done wherever the primary site is. But instead of 10 or 12 visits over 3 or 4 months, it might be 2 or 3. Again, that idea that that barrier to entry is so high for a lot of these patients. And while it's important that we give them therapy and we give them access to potential treatments that could change their lives, it shouldn't be at the cost of upending their entire life. So they still have to have a quality of life, and that's what we're trying to balance out.